This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, my friend.
How you doing?
TSD, Death by Doll, Stalin Doll, the
Yes.
Doll, New York Doll.
The New York Doll. You also have Time Up Timmy recently. I don't know how many nicknames you have for me. It's quite a few.
Timothy Seymour Doll, Death by Doll. Time Up Timmy. What affectionate nickname do you have for me?
Oh, well, I mean, you kind of made them yourself. There's just Big Lou. There's actual characters. I mean,
wait, Tim, can you say that in a little bit sexier tone?
Well, there's Big Lou.
Which, by the way, we know the furthest thing from anybody else's mind when Big Lou enters the room is sex. They all flee.
Anyhow,
all right, okay. Well, look, now that we're on this subject, I'd say that there is a tie this week for Ass Clown of the Week.
Yes.
Now, that, I don't know if Mongoloid is an insult, and I don't mean Mongolian, but that Trump-loving My Pillow, Mike Lindell, still has not given up on trying to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election.
He's on meth, I think. I think he's on meth. That's my hunch.
Well, he used to be on crack. I
think he moved on to meth.
I say, meh. Anyway, he's now teamed up with self-described expert on Satanism to get the job of overturning the election done. So Dr. Lyle Rapacki, who pitched himself to law enforcement agencies as an expert on devil worship during the satanic panic of the 1980s, now believes, Mr. Rapacki, that he's an expert in election fraud. Now, the idiot, this is his claim. It's been unfair. It's been unreal. It's been demonic. Rapacki has also adapted his purported expertise on Satanism to QAnon, as he's endorsed conspiracy theories, claiming that the Democratic Party runs a satanic pedophile ring. I mean, we know that pedophile rings are out there. We know sex trafficking is real. I don't really think it's to one party or the other. I just think it's a nightmare that happens worldwide and has to end. Okay, that's idiot number one. Excuse me.
The idiot number one, who, by the way, his net worth is $300 million as a fucking pillow salesman. How's that possible? All right, keep on going.
He should go from pillows to pills. I think he already has.
I think he has.
Ass Clown number two. Trump's ex-lawyer, Sidney Powell, claiming, quote, well, no reasonable person would believe me as her defense against the defamation suit brought against her by Dominion voting systems. Now, we all know she made ridiculous fucking claims. The election is a fraud. It's rigged. But this was her most outlandish claim, that the election rigging scheme was linked to long dead Venezuelan leader Hugo Chavez. So we have the demons and we have the ghosts. Now, this is just beyond belief. She ridiculously claimed that it's impossible to hold her liable for the conspiracy theories she spread because her opinions and legal theories were completely unreliable. In other words, you can't sue her because she's a fucking liar of the lowest order. Now, I just have to go on for a minute, Tim.
Yes.
The amount of pathological lying that we've had to put up with, well, always, but especially in the last 4 years from politicians and any idiot with a political or corporate connection is itself beyond belief. I mean, from Trump and his soulless offspring to Tucker, a.k.a. pucker up and kiss Trump's ass, Carlson, and most of Fox News to nearly 100% of the Republicans and about 78% of the, I'm going to call them the Democrats, of which at least a small percentage seem to have, some of the Democrats seem to have a bit of soul left, maybe half a brain. But I think, and I want to start a petition, please tell me you'll be the first to sign. I think that anyone that wants to enter politics has to have like a Fitbit lie detector hooked up to their wrist in every fucking public speech they make. And not only a lie detector test, and I think they should be mandatory, but we need to see their tax returns. I do not believe that millionaires or billionaires, for the most part, have much real concern for the needs of real people. And if you want to investigate, and I do encourage everyone to know just how many of these robber barons are in the pocket of gas, oil, energy, communication networks, etc., I suggest you go to opensecrets.org. Let me repeat, opensecrets.org, and it will fill you in on exactly who is getting how much money from which organizations, especially the gun lobby. And I'll get back to that in a minute. Please, Tim, I need a break.
Well, sure. I mean, wasn't Alex Jones, wasn't that his defense with the whole, he was basically like, well, of course you couldn't take this guy seriously. He's just entertainment, even though he keeps on spreading a bunch of information that was proven not to be correct. All right, so I'm going to move on.
The last time I wanted to hear some fat idiot that doesn't have half a brain left and is raking in millions of dollars on falsehoods and never. We are definitely in the wrong line of work. This is ridiculous.
So the University of Central Oklahoma's cheerleading squad, which is considered the best in the country. They've won 10 out of the championships out of the last 11 years.
Tim, have
Yes.
Have you ever seen me twirl a baton?
I know you have a history. I haven't seen it actually, but I believe it.
I was practicing with my police nightstick the other night, but it's a little too thick. It's a little too thick for my fingers. Please go on.
Yes. So they've been disqualified and suspended from the annual competition because they got busted with their extreme hazing. I guess kind of a boot camp kind of thing they do. I mean, so, and of course it's been their hazing included whippings, beatings, brandings, forced consumption of any food suggested, binge drinking, prolonged sleep deprivation forced by, that's dangerous, forced sexual exhibitionism, which would result in quote unquote extreme embarrassment.
All of those things are exactly what you have to do if you want to join my cheerleading squad as well. No wonder I'm the only one in it.
Well, clearly this works. They've won 10 out of the 11 years of the national champions. I guess they have to stop what works. I mean, they're the best in the country, and maybe you got to weed out the wimps. You got to weed out the wimps.
I'd like to know what kind of implement they're using for the whippings. I'd like to know what they're forcing people to eat. I actually would like a more accurate rundown. But what's always amazing to me is when these hazing rituals happen, whether it's fraternities or sororities, is no wonder I didn't go to college.
Well, the frat boy ones always seem a little less interesting. I think the cheerleading one sounds far more exciting.
Well, people do occasionally die from alcohol poisoning, which is ridiculous, but
the frat boy one's more about just binge drinking hard alcohol. This one seems a little more on the BDSM hazing side, and seems to work.
Tim, you were hazed before you joined Retrovirus, but you seem to have survived, and hey, you're still with me, honey. Hey.
Do you think there should be premarital or pre-pregnancy hazing? So it's like, oh, you want to live with me for the rest of your life? Here's a parade coming through your fucking bedroom at 3 a.m. every night of the week for like 9 months before we decide to lock it down.
Well, that sounds like a reason for me to say I might endorse marriage. Now, okay, as if anybody needs another reason not to breed. You know how I feel about that. Okay. Selfish, vain, vulgar, expensive. Doesn't fit in, doesn't come out. U.S. scientists have now detected 55 chemicals in the blood of pregnant women and unborn children that they've never before reported in humans and are linked to plastics and cosmetics, along with 42 mystery compounds. Scientists discovered 96 unique and strange chemicals in pregnant women. They found that this is going through the placenta. Now, approximately 55 of the chemicals have never even been reported in the human body. The other 42, though, have no source or use, but experts say they come from products, plastics, cosmetics, construction material. And approximately 40 of these chemicals used in plasticizers, your takeout food, 28 in cosmetics. We all know that lipstick is often made from pigs, whatever. 25 in consumer products, 29 in pharmaceuticals, pesticides. I mean, not only are you what you eat, even if you don't know what it is you're eating, because we don't, because we've been polluted since fucking birth in this country, but you do face birth defects. And just about everybody I know that has children in the last decade, and really, please stop. It's just not fair to the planet or yourself. One of you will grow to regret it and resent it. They all seem to have some kind of psychological, emotional, or physical problems. But I guess
also sexual issues, actually, they're coming out in a lot of these studies, that there's a lot of estrogen in a lot of these plastics. So particularly if you are born as a male, they're seeing all these different shrinkage of the genitals, all this kind of stuff that's going.
Testicles in weird places.
Yeah, low sperm counts are they're the lowest sperm counts ever detected these days. So
I think that's a move in the right direction. And I remember it was about 10 years ago that all the hormones in chickens were giving man boobs to boys. And you know what? It's like, man boobs. Well, if you wear a nice sexy bra, consider it.
So a 59-foot tapeworm emerged and was removed from a man's ass after he complained of flatulence. 67-year-old man from Nong Khai, Thailand. They suspect he ingested the parasite larvae when he was eating some raw beef. He went to the hospital and he was complaining. They took a stool sample and they were like, okay, well, we found 28 infective larvae in here. We're going to give you this medicine. 24 hours later, he's like, I don't feel so good. At which point the doctors kind of gathered around his asshole and they basically reeled out, I should say, a 59-foot tapeworm from his fucking ass.
Oh, do you know the circumference on that bad boy?
I think
they're thin.
They're thin. It's basically basically a 59-foot piece of spaghetti coming out of your ass.
Well, I've heard that, if you think you have a tapeworm, I'm not sure this works. I don't remember the last time I put an apple near my anus, but they say that if you think you have a tapeworm and you put like a bowl of milk or an apple or a steak, that it might come trotting out. But you know what? I look, if I need help, I'll ask.
Well, if I need help, I'll ask.
Tim,
I don't know where I'm going with this.
I've got no problem sticking my fingers where nobody else wants to. If it would make you feel better, not a problem, friend.
Oh boy! All right. Well, moving on. So there's a new saliva test. So you do a home test that can detect whether someone has had a concussion or not. It's a game changer because it costs so much less money than, if they detect it, then they'll do the regular protocol, maybe give you an MRI. But in terms of just sports or just whatever, this new test is supposed to be 94% accuracy. Have 94% accuracy. Have you ever had a concussion?
Well, I've had brain scans because there was one point when I was living in New Orleans, extremely hot weather, and I would always, not always, but I often would faint, but only on my face or the back of my head if the floor was marble. What is it? In banks or in the post office. And I did have to have, brain scans. No damage. I got a pretty fucking hard nugget. But no, and I don't think I've ever given anyone a concussion either.
I've had, I think, quite a few. I used to play contact sports. So in junior high, I played football, and then in high school, I played lacrosse. And definitely I saw stars a few times. But that's pretty self-inflicted because I was kind of a psycho, Well,
falling on the front or the back of your head in the middle of the day is pretty fucking horrible. But no damage so far. I'm not the one who has problems in my head.
I've rattled the brain a couple times, that's for sure.
Could rather rattle my ass and see if a tapeworm comes out. But what about they've also developed a shouting test, right up my alley, for COVID, because
what do you mean?
A shouting, because all of the bacteria, the virus comes out of your mouth.
Aerosols.
So they have a test actually, beats the anal swab that the Chinese have, beats the nose swab that the US has, but they've developed it. I don't know where they're actually giving these shouting tests, but
the CDU, the party that Merkel, Germany, is part of, has took historic defeats in an election a couple days ago. they're furious in Germany. Now, Germany handled it pretty well in the beginning, but the rollout of vaccines has been moving at snail's pace. And I mean, I always say, because America, they're not allowed to have a military like the United States does. So a lot of the mobilization from us is that we have this insane military, but they're about to go into, I think, their fourth major. This is supposed to be the most insane lockdown yet. They're in their third wave. People are freaking out.
Well, France is shutting down. Italy is shutting down. And the thing is, the problem with America, I mean, spring fucking break now. Bike rallies in Daytona Beach, Miami Beach, Florida, the biggest liars in the country about how many COVID cases there were. Yeah. And on top of that, so great that the vaccines are becoming more readily available. I did have my first vax. I will go for the second. And it's only because we did consult the expert. That would be your brother, who knows the thing or two about vaccinations. But the thing is, if a third of the country is not going to be vaccinated because they're Republic morons, and because that the chief of all liars, Trump, had it secretly, and then just like, I had it, and then you should get it after lying about it from day one out of his fucking mouth, and it's like, people have reason to mistrust the U.S. government, the medical, vaccinations. People have been experimented on before, but I think right now there's no time for mistrust, because what the hell's going to happen when 2/3 of the country is vaccinated and 1/3 isn't? Well, you know what? They can greet their own fate, and they'll believe it's real when they end up in the hospital in the ICU with a tracheotomy, and we'll see that goes down.
Well, speaking of Florida and spring break, there's been 2 shark attacks in the last week with spring breakers. Bryce Albert, 20, who's frat boy, frolicking in the waves. And of course, this is one of the biggest, the black-tip shark. It's one of the biggest global shark migrations that happens annually. And it was just the guy just frolicking. There's probably like 1,000 of these things around him, and it wasn't trying to eat him. It just, it's like you decide to run through a pack of wolves, and you get bit. And then there was the more serious one actually was a boy, 9-year-old.
Oh, I saw
Jay Waskoff. Yeah, I mean, he just they saved his arm. He got a little mangled, but the thing just latched onto his shoulder. But I mean, if you're 9 years old and you got attacked by a shark, they're from Wisconsin too. I don't think he's gonna really want to go back to the ocean. But
we were speaking about the pandemic. Yeah. I'd like to speak about, in closing, the other epidemic.
Please do.
And this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Last year, more than 41,500 people in the USA, which is a record, according to the independent data collection and research group Gun Violence Archive. And by the way, gun violence in America is 25 times higher than any other wealthy nation. Okay, so 41,500 people died from gun violence last year, but half of them were suicide. Okay, now in 2020 as well, 23 million guns were bought. Okay, in January of this year, 2 million guns were bought. Okay, since January of this year, there's already been 7 mass shootings. Okay, 2 in the last 10 days, both by 21-year-olds who bought the guns within hours, if not days, if not hours, and then went off to execute innocent people that they didn't even fucking know. And then we're still having a debate with these dolts in Congress that can't get it together to pass stricter background checks or ban assault rifles. Like, look, if somebody can't wait 10 days for a background check to get a fucking gun, you better ask them why they can't fucking wait. And unless it's a woman, you better ask them twice. But then again, opensecrets.org, find out how much money it takes to bribe these fucking crooks in Congress to keep their fucking mouth shut. I mean, look, don't quote the Constitution when it's actually fucking outdated. And by the way, the only reason to have an Uzi, an AK, an automatic fucking rifle is to execute people. I'm not against guns in general. I'm for the individual can have a gun, especially a woman, especially if she's trained. She should feel safe in her own fucking house. I'm not against well-planned, selected hunting. Not saying that I'm a Ted Nugent or for it, but everything has its place. But I am not for weapons of mass destruction in the hands of people that cannot get vital health care, especially mental health care, because this country doesn't have it.
So what happened in Boulder was because wasn't there a ban on assault rifles, and then the NRA appealed it, and then
2 weeks before.
Well, no, it got overturned. I think it was like 6 weeks before, I thought, and then 2 weeks before the guy bought all those weapons.
I mean, the thing is, look, it's just. I don't even know what the solution is. You can't ban them. Everybody's already got them, except for not everybody has fucking guns. And if everybody did have a gun, is it supposed to really be safer? Well, one guy I saw on the news went out to get his gun, but he didn't kill the shooter. And whose job is it to fucking kill the killers anyway? And the thing is, why at 21 are these guys, it's always men, already so fucking damaged that the only thing they can think of is possibly suicide by cop after they take out strangers who were not responsible for the dilemma in the first place. And this brings me back to the Menendez brothers. At least they went after the right target, not as if there was a right target, but they went after the people, that was their parents, who fucked them up in the first place. I just don't, how am I supposed to understand how it makes any sense? I can't, and I don't even know what the solution is. OpenSecrets.org. Go ahead. See how much money that would be the Democrats and the Republicans are getting from every corporation that is.
It's not going to change. It's not going to change. I mean, after the Sandy Hook of all those kids, I mean, you have like a big massacre.
Oh, Sandy Hook, Columbine, Virginia.
The jury's out. America likes it. Clearly, they have no problems with this at all. I mean, really, what would that take for America to surrender and allow gun control?
Look, it's not that's not even the issue to me. The issue
that's fine, but
the issue is this: it's too late for gun control. But the issue is background checks taking 10 days should not be a fucking issue, especially when we know that a lot of young people coming up now are going to be mentally disturbed because of COVID, because of the lockdown, because of bad parenting, because they should have never fucking been born in the first place. Another reason to not fucking breed. You want to breed a killer? Ask yourself this. You want a fucking baby? Does a baby want you? This is the Lydia and Spin, Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, episode number 89 with Adele Bertei. She's not a fucking breeder either. This is the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and our special guest, Adele Bertei. I don't even know where to begin, but let me start like this. Musician, composer, songwriter, incredible vocalist. I was pleased to have her co-star on some of my recordings on Smoke in the Shadow. Absolutely fantastic. Author, whose work I think originally maybe appeared in the new Fuck You, very good title, Eileen Miles' anthology about lesbian reading. That was quite a while ago. More recently, her first of a few more coming, memoir called Peter and the Wolves. And something I've been delighting myself with, which will be out March 23rd, is a book from the University of Texas Press called Why Labelle Matters. And I have to say, Ladell, it is one of your finest pieces of writing. I mean, I got hard nipples just saying that.
Thank you. No, I'm proud of that one. It's a good one. I think.
I'm very curious about that. I know nothing about it. Is it about the band Labelle? Is it about Patti LaBelle solo or?
Tim, first of all, yes. Tanya Pearson read from her book Why Marianne Faithfull Matters, and it's the same press that's publishing Adele. So it's this series of books about why certain musicians matter. Adele, tell us what it's about, because it's fan-fucking-tastic.
Well, these books are more from like a personal perspective of why we think these artists matter. So it's kind of, like part memoir, part critical, cultural appreciation, part, in my case, is part metaphysics about, sound and matter and the effects of music on us physiologically, and emotionally. So yeah, so it's a kind of a mix of all that. And, Labelle, those girls have not gotten their due in terms of like critical praise. I mean, they were the first female rock stars to come out like Bowie in these silver spacesuits.
What I loved, Adele, is you've got so much history in there about not only Labelle, but the music industry and the music of that time, because they weren't the average girl group, but they were still in that category. And then a female manager, Vicky Wickman, decides we got to really up this ante, because they were touring, making no money, being ripped off, doing bad cover songs. Not only is the writing great and your personal connection, and I want to go into a little bit of that, like your first exposure to Labelle, but just how they transmorphed. And your chapter that begins with Alchemy is also fantastic. So give us a little bit more about, you coming on to Labelle and just kind of how that also propelled you into music.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I was probably about 17 or 18 when I first saw them play a concert in Cleveland. And I mean, this was revelatory because I was into Bowie at the time. This was like 1975-ish. And they come out and, they're in spacesuits, and Nona Hendrix descends onto the stage from wires, and, Nona's chasing Sarah Dash around the fucking stage with a whip. And
oh my God,
Patti LaBelle's going batshit crazy on the vocals. And, and they had this incredible blend that was so ferocious. I call it gospel punk at one point in the book, because it was this unbridled, ferocious harmony, and it came from gospel roots, but the aggression and it was kind of like Black female sexuality finally unfurled on the world,
And Patti LaBelle kind of pushed into that because she wasn't too sure about making this big transition, but it was the right thing to do at the right time, because
yeah, totally. Because girl groups were on they were teetering out, and these self-contained boy bands from Britain were all the rage. And the Black girl groups were all about respectability and trying to blend into like this white appropriation that just wasn't them. They weren't talking about their truths. They weren't speaking any type of truths to power. And then when they met Vicky Wickham over in England, she's like, you women are amazing. You've got something to say. It's time to start talking. And, the only women that were starting to kind of come out and play with their sexuality and flip the Jezebel trope.
Yeah, the Jezebel.
Yeah, exactly. Was, Betty Davis, really. And they just took it that much farther into this kind of metaphysical space thing where, we have to transcend where we are. And they did it in a way that Bowie was doing. It was Ziggy Stardust. And no other women had done that before.
Well, and again, influenced by the British. I mean, first of all, their female manager did a lot for music in Britain at that time, which was more adventurous, because at that point, America was, post Eagles, Fleetwood Mac.
But you still had Sun Ra, who obviously influenced George Clinton. And if you're disenfranchised as a Black American, going to outer space. And I knew a Yusef Lateef, who I knew close with Sun Ra, and Sun Ra would talk to him and say, Yusef, I just came back from Neptune. And I said, well, Yusef, how do you respond to a point like that? And he goes, well, he was totally serious. So you just kind of take it in and just say, okay.
Yeah. Nona Hendrix was very influenced by Ra. She loved
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. George Clinton used to cut her hair in Jersey. He was her barber.
Newark. Okay. Yes.
And she was the main songwriter of the group, who was, dealing with all these space age themes and stuff. So.
Oh, amazing. So, because you worked with Pointer Sisters too. Now, of course, they had a different thing, but this was a girl group who obviously covered not just what we know them to do. They did jazz records. They did country. I mean, really eclectic mix. And of course, that's Oakland, not kind of the Rust Belt Philly thing. What would you say, when working with them a little bit, and I don't know to what degree you worked with them.
I wrote one song for them, which was kind of like going back to their early kind of scatology.
Right.
Because the Pointer Sisters were doing this really fab thing with, the 30s and 40s thing at the same time that Bette Midler was doing her whole 30s and 40s thing with Divine Miss M, right? But then Labelle,
next level.
Just detonated it all.
I mean, of course, their biggest hit that the general public knows is Lady Marmalade. When did that song come out? Did you see them do that live?
I think it was 75, but there was an album that they did, the only record that they did for RCA after they became Labelle was called Pressure Cooking. And that fucking record just got lost. But I'm telling you, if you listen to it today, it will blow your head off.
Because RCA was doing Bowie at the time. They had left being the big classical catalog company. They had some young blood that said, you got to go.
Right.
This is the hippest shit right here. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. So that's kind of all parallel there, basically.
Well, yeah, and it's really confounding why RCA dropped them after Pressure Cooking, because the record was very critically acclaimed. People, the music critics loved it, but all that female sexuality and black politics and stuff, I just think it was too much for RCA.
Let's talk about you now, though. You're in Cleveland. You're rowdy. You're weird. You're weird. You're already funky. You already got gospel in your soul.
Yeah.
Had you started singing yet? I mean, other than in reform school or church?
Well, I was singing gospel in reform school, but then when I got out, it was hard because I was the anomaly. I was a white girl growing up in black culture. So then I started getting into rock and roll when I met Peter Lochner.
Tell us a little bit about Peter Lochner, because he's also the main character in your book, Peter and the Wolves. And a lot of people don't really know it's small, but it's important, his legacy, because he worked with a lot of people that came out of the Cleveland scene, went on to become Per Ubu, the Dead Boys. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Peter Lochner was the catalyst of what I would call punk in Cleveland. I mean, he formed Per Ubu with David Thomas and, Rocket from the Tombs before that, which gave birth to the Dead Boys. I mean, he was incredibly generous with getting people started. But he was a terrible alcoholic and incredibly self-destructive, and was at heart a singer-songwriter in the tradition of Bob Dylan and, Richard and Linda Thomas. And he didn't know how to abide by his authenticity in a scene that was very adamant.
And look, one of the greatest songs of that era, the Dead Boys did cover, and a few other people, is Ain't It Fun When Your Friends Hate What You've Become.
Right, exactly.
Ooh.
I mean, he could write a punk song like nobody's business, but at the same time, I lived with the guy and I sat with him and listened to, Woody Guthrie and Richard and Linda Thomas, and he loved those songs, and he would write, these folky kind of ballads that were absolutely beautiful and dark, but his alcoholism and his inability to be himself. He was also the son of a World War II veteran who raised him on toting guns and drinking as much alcohol as he could possibly consume, saying, because he wanted to be a man's man. And, it's so interesting about the Peter and the Wolves book, because although I talk about Nan Golden and my relationship with her before I met Peter, and I'm very queer in the book, it's men that have responded most to it, because I think men really need to be seen.
Stop tapping on the table, Adele. Stop playing the drums, honey. I know you got the music anyways.
For someone that you respected so much, that kind of took you under their wing, that was so self-destructive. Emotionally, how was that for you? Someone that you maybe, I don't know, looked up to or really respected, and then you see this person essentially killing themselves. How did you respond to that?
I mean, it was devastating because, we suffered from the same disease. I mean, I could have gone down with him very easily if I had have hung around. But, you have survivor's guilt too, We were supposed to move to New York together and start a band. Television, Tom Verlaine loved his guitar playing. I mean, people knew he was one of the most exceptional guitar players. But his self-destructiveness, he fucked up every time he was given an opportunity. So we were supposed to move together to New York. And then after he died, I was just a wreck. I mean, I moved, he died on June 22nd. And by August, I had moved to New York.
What year, honey?
1977, the summer of Sam, baby.
I think that's when we met.
Yeah, I was going to ask that because right around that time, I wanted to know how long you ever.
Wait, Tim, how old were you in 77? 3?
2.
We've known each other since Timmy Tied Up was 2. I don't remember how we met, but I know we used to do a lot of dancing together. Tell me about that. How did we meet?
I was a friend of Bradley's from Cleveland.
Bradley Field, who I forced to become the drummer of Teenage Jesus after I found him setting a homeless man on fire and said, "You better do something more. You better do something more. Something different than that, son."
Yeah, I call Bradley the imp of the perverse. So, I knew him. I came to New York. He was one of the first people I knew in New York. So I called him. He told me to come over. I met you in your cubbyhole at the loft on Delancey Street.
Let's not talk about my cubbyhole already here. You're talking about my loft's cubbyhole.
Your loft cubbyhole. Yes, she had a loft way up. It was like this. You had to crawl up a ladder and crawl into this little space.
But once you got in there, I wasn't going to let you leave. So we met at that Delancey Street loft where a lot of bands rehearsed.
Yeah, and that's where I saw the original first few Contortions rehearsing. From the cubbyhole.
How'd you end up getting into that group?
Yeah, how'd you infiltrate that? You see it and then you're in it.
It was James Nares, Pat Place, James Chance squawking on the sax, and nobody was sitting in on the drums. And I just said, fuck it. And I crawled down the ladder and I jumped in on the drums and started playing a rhythm. And I don't know how to fucking play the drums, but
it's no wave.
I do have a little bit of rhythm in me.
Nice.
So
I would say it's the Sicilian in you, but you know what I mean when I say that, honey. Don't have to go further. Go ahead.
No, but James turns to me and in his strangely autistic way goes, "Hey, you got natural rhythm. You want to be in my band?" So the next thing I knew, he had me over to his house and was saying, "Or I want you to play the drums like you play I want you to play the ace tone organ like you play the drums." So I'm playing the ace tone organ. I'm playing clusters on the ace tone organ.
Cool.
Little baby ham fist.
Back to Sun Ra, And James was very particular. It's like he wanted me to play this cluster as opposed to that cluster. But then eventually, as the band coalesced, we were just playing like all these rhythms off of each other on our instruments. It just kind of came together.
So yes, it's this arrhythmic or atonal kind of funk James Brownish kind of syncopation ensemble. And then once you guys got in, I mean, once it's locked and you had it down, I mean, it's phenomenal, legendary.
It had its time for sure. That configuration was the shit.
It took a moment to coalesce. I mean, I think our first gig was just like, it sounded like cats in a bag thrown into the canal.
No, that was Mars, honey. My favorite band.
Mars reminded me of my schizophrenic mother talking backwards when I first saw them. It was like, whoa.
They were my big influence on me was the band Mars. Definitely. So we need to talk a little bit about our dance-offs.
Oh, yeah.
Because we were
I don't know about this.
We were the dancing queens.
Oh, we
okay.
We would go to this bar called Puffy's.
Why? It's still there.
Is it still there? Is Puffy's still there? Oh, one of the few spots that are still there, right? Oh my God. And they had the best jukebox and it was all old funk, like Dyke and the Blazers and James Brown. And we would dance our asses off every night. And me and Lydia doing the four corners, honey. We
had a similar background, only I avoided reform school. I sent other people there. But we had a similar Rochester, Cleveland upbringing in the Black ghettos in that community. And that music, because we're pretty much the same age, the music, especially of Black rebellion in the late 60s, was very influential, as well as the race riots that happened in our hometowns at the same time. I mean, this, I think, really influenced both of us. Now, not me musically, but me politically, for sure. Oh, yeah. And still, white girl that would be Sicilian girls got to dance.
Right.
You've seen me dance, Tim. I dance with your wife all the time.
So, fine. So going back to the dance-offs. I mean, the two of you just dancing, or was it a
competition?
Yeah, competition.
It was us against everybody else. I
nice.
Think. I don't think there were too many others hitting the dance floor when we were on it. I'm not sure.
A crowd would gather and watch us.
So, I mean, Lydia claims she hated disco when it was coming out right around that time. Did you hate disco, Adele?
I never hated disco. Never, never, never. I mean, I've always kind of secretly loved, even back then, I loved pop music. There was certain pop music that I loved.
You didn't live below a disco that played music till 6 a.m. on the weekends, as I did for that period. No. I mean, Sylvester, yes, but that's about it.
I loved Chic, and there were
Oh,
certain.
Chic's great. Yeah. I don't want to jump ahead too much, but when you're working in England with kind of new wave people, I mean, Bernard Edwards, Tony Thompson, Bernard Edwards rhythm section is what a lot of those new wave bands were modeling, at least what they wanted as their rhythm section. I mean, it was
totally.
Yeah.
But even the bands like Scritti Politti, Rip Rig and Panic, all those bands were into funk and
big time.
Dance music,
I was into funk, but I was not into disco. And I was into earlier funk for sure. But no, I mean, new wave, disco was not my trip.
Wait, speaking of Scritti Politti, did you ever hear Miles Davis's cover of Perfect Way? What the hell is that? Only one word I can think of with that choice was cocaine, I think. It's pretty, I mean, it's kind of smooth jazz and him like squeaking on the Harmon mute trumpet. It's bizarre.
How bizarre. When I was in the no wave scene, it was hard because I was really a singer, and having a good voice was not an asset in that. It was like
just the opposite.
Actually sing, fuck you,
Yeah, but you had ears, and so it comes down to interpretation at that point, even if you can sing really well. So I mean, obviously you got it. You understood what they're going for.
Well, look, you can't do everything in one band necessarily. So that's why we both have done many different kinds of things. It's right. Like no wave. We may have begun there, but we didn't stop there. Exactly. Both of us kept going to different kinds of music, different kind of scenes. So, all right, Contortions, enough is enough, because let's face it, that was a rough ride.
For sure. And, it was very exciting, the deconstruction of that whole scene and the sensationalist parts of it. It was like very much the spectacle too. So, it was very theatrical as well as musical for us. So
did you tour much with them?
The only place I played out of town with them was this infamous gig we did in Toronto. Do you remember that gig, Lydia?
There's parts of it I might.
I think you might.
Teenage Jesus and the Contortions.
I think so.
So why was it notorious?
Well, because Bradley Fields was outside of the venue screaming the N-word at a bunch of people that
doesn't usually fly
as well as his usual mantra, I am the beast 666.
Yeah, and they beat the living shit.
Oh boy.
I don't remember that at all, but I'm sure he deserved it.
So was he just like blasted on drugs or alcohol, or what was that all about?
Oh, probably alcohol, but
like he would drink so much he could blow bubbles from all the yeast off his tongue.
Yeah. I mean, I have to admit, I applauded him getting his ass kicked at that.
Oh boy.
I
don't remember that. There were a lot of antics in those days.
Incidents and accidents, yes.
During or shortly after you become the personal assistant to Brian Eno?
That was during when we were all playing the artist space gigs. I was working for Brian Eno as a personal assistant at that time. And he wanted, he was very excited about that scene. And I took him to all of those shows that we played. And that's how No New York kind of evolved out of that.
Would he give you credit for that?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay. All right. Cool.
I do not give him credit for the atrocious production of Teenage Jesus on the No New York album. Thank you very much. But I'm not sure if that is around the time he fucked himself into the hospital or not, which I have great respect for. But other than that, he did a great production for Mars. I think they sound fantastic on. Yeah. And Contortions didn't sound bad, but it was Robert Quine that really understood Teenage Jesus and his production. And then, of course, Weasel Walters' mixing and mastering of Live Teenage Jesus. But look, people consider it a seminal record. I consider it a semen-stained record, but that's only because, was it then that he fucked himself into the hospital or not? Tell me, Dill.
I don't remember anything about the hospital.
Well, I didn't fuck him into the hospital. All right, carry on.
But Quine was I loved Bob Quine. That guy, his guitar playing to me is still the most insane.
God.
That time, But yeah. So that's what happened, and I ended up going on tour with you, Lydia, and Beth B and Scott B to Europe, doing solo stuff after I left the Contortions.
What were you doing on that tour?
I was playing with backing tapes that I made.
Okay.
I was playing my guitar and just doing original stuff with backing tapes at that.
All right. Well, I mean, we had to bring it to Europe. I started bringing my shit to Europe in 78 because I knew America it was not ready, didn't want it. And I
Right.
think one of my advantages was I was so stubborn. I just kept going back and back and back. And they had a better understanding of just weirdos. So, okay, we went on tour. So yeah, Adele and I were both in some of the Beth and Scott B films.
Yep.
The Offenders, where we're like playing a girl gang. And I have to say, nobody's seen The Offenders, which is ridiculous, but Teenage Jesus was doing a residency at Max's. And I asked Beth if she wanted to show films. Max's would have these residencies every Monday, 4 Mondays in a row. And instead of them showing films, they decided to make a film every week. So they made this film, The Offenders, which almost everybody on the Lower East Side was in. Walter Lore, John Lurie, Pat Place, Laura Kennedy, you, me, Anna Sui.
Eric Ozian. I mean, everybody was in that.
And it was basically just about two badass gangs. But this is what I remember most about that film. They actually shoved a car into the East River. Hello.
Into the East River. It was unbelievable.
Amazing. And that was really the first and probably only I can think of. I don't want to call it no wave serial.
Yeah.
And that was pretty cool. We did some cool shit in those days.
We would perform at Max's and raise enough money so that they could film the next episode. And that was pretty incredible. MoMA owns that film now.
Assholes.
Whether we'll ever see it, you'll have to talk to your buddy, Miss Beth B, about that.
No, I know what's going on. Look, there's going to be a big retrospective of all the B films. I mean, and were you in other B films?
Mm-mm.
Just The Offenders. Well, you're a star in that, honey. I'm telling you.
Why, thank you. But it's a crazy little film. So anyway.
So what about your band, The Bloods?
Yes.
First of all, why did the Bloods and the Crips not come after you calling your band the Bloods? I can't even, where did they endorse you? That would have been cool. Like the Girl Bloods, OGG, Original Girl Gangsta.
So what was that, Tim, you were asking?
So you guys toured as an opener for The Clash?
The Bloods.
We only opened for them at Bond when all those bands were opening for The Clash. They did like 5 nights. And I think us and the Bush Tetras opened for them one night, and then they had local bands opening for them all the different nights. But they wanted girl bands, so they got us and the Bush Tetras.
Tell us about the Bloods a little bit, because that was definitely different. That was on the same time and scene as No Wave, but it wasn't No Wave. It was something more funky, more soulful.
Yeah. It's it's kind of tragic about the Bloods because it was a fucking good band. I mean, there's all of my music is not on Spotify. I talk about cancel culture. I got canceled a long fucking time ago because I was just too radical for the record industry. But you can find my music on my website, but there's a few tracks by the Bloods on my website that are so killer. I
gotta investigate that more. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, and in part due to Brenda Alderman, our black bass player, who was funk personified, and I loved working with her, but we got hit hard by drugs and heroin, and it just brought the band down, But boy, when we were rampaging through Europe, we sure did have a hell of a good time.
How did you get to Europe? What did you do? How long was that tour? What year was that with the Bloods?
I think it was 1980. We originally went over to play with the Au Pairs. Do a couple of gigs with the Au Pairs, and they did a single on Exit Records with us, which was called Button Up. And we ended up playing Berlin and touring all over Holland. And then I lived in Amsterdam for a while during that period, and we played a lot in Amsterdam. And
it was so much easier then just to go and do frickin' gigs. I mean, and also Holland at that time, well, right after that time, had a lot of poetry festivals, which also, if they're having poetry festivals, they're having rock shows.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was just, and again, it was good time to go there. And you went, I went, we had to go.
Right.
So you go to do a few shows, you do some more shows, you might stay there. That's the way now.
Exactly. One thing would go into the next. And, the Venus Weltklang Festival in Berlin that happened in 80 or 81. And it was like bands like Malaria, the Slits, the Bloods, the Au Pairs, all these women fronted or, mostly women bands.
All with very different sounds, by the way. Everybody had a very different sound.
Totally. But that's one of the things, Tim, that was happening in New York in the late 70s that was so exciting. And no woman has written about no wave and that scene from the perspective of all the fucking women that were in New York, internationally, from Japan, France, Germany, England, making music, shooting films, writing books,
photography,
all of it,
Well, I wonder what that is because as women aren't paid the same as men for the same jobs, at least in the States, New York just being on the verge of bankruptcy where there is no money, it's kind of there's a more equal playing ground at that point, or maybe an interpretation I'm making right now, but off the cuff. But I'm wondering if it was that inviting to women on some level, at least.
Well, Adele, I'm very interested in your concept about this point because, first of all, for some reason, I think especially the no wave scene, which also included photography, film, music, that we didn't feel a gender divide. At least I didn't. Maybe that's because I was a macho bulldog anyway, and so were you. But that didn't feel like it just didn't feel like there was a gender divide. It wasn't a fucking issue. Everybody was doing everything. And the people that came to New York from all different places were all so weird that that's the only place they could be.
Well, that was what was so fucking exciting about it is that, people weren't into identity politics at all in those days. Like in terms of gender fluidity, if you were into somebody, you slept with them. It didn't matter what sex they were. You didn't have to, wrap a fucking corset of I'm bisexual or I'm a lesbian.
Right.
All I tried to do was not get toilet paper on my shoe when I was in the bathroom of CBGB's fucking the Paley twins. But they were cute.
Lydia, don't you think the presence of all these women artists and musicians also pushed the guys to go that much further in terms of taking creative risks? I do. I think it was just like nobody cared. Even feminism, we didn't even call ourselves feminists. We were just who we were.
And also the big difference was this. Nobody thought about money. First of all, we didn't need that much.
Right.
We did about $10 a day.
Yeah.
We didn't think about success. Nobody was interested in fame. You could get your records out because you could easily press 100 or 200. There was, we knew who, there were those 5 bands, we'll say, that were commercial enough to get signed. But if even Teenage Jesus could get records out by some weirdo like Charles Ball, the thing is, the playing field was very different. And you weren't thinking about, my career. It wasn't a fucking career. It was a calling.
Right, exactly. We were feminists, but we didn't have to proclaim we were feminists.
But it's my interpretation based on what you're saying, Adele. This sounds like a group of people that are brave. And when I think of the current landscape of identity politics, that's fear because you want to ghettoize yourself. You want to you want to be part of a group rather than just putting your own personal, individual, pursuit and expression on the line and being brave enough to be yourself.
Yeah, who wants to live in a fucking box with a label on it? I don't know.
Some people do.
A lot of people seem to want that.
Turns out.
You know what? If you want to live in my box, I won't put a label on it.
Roar.
So, Adele, I want to touch on this for a minute. If you weren't there, and you were, and I was, people don't know what the streets of New York City were like in 77, 78, 70, et cetera, walking down the street. Every 5 to 10 steps, you would be verbally harassed. There was so much aggro on the street. And I found a way to deal with it. Because look, as much as I like to box, you can't box the whole fucking neighborhood, right? So my way of dealing with it, and this is also, around the time too, a little bit later, Cyndi Lauper, Baby's Got Back. I would just find a way to deal with it with such a funny one-liner that they'd be laughing and I'd be halfway down the block because you can't take it on. How would you deal with all the aggro? There was a lot of freaking aggro.
There was a lot of aggro, but I was such a tough kid and I was very boyish, right? I was a lot less feminine and you had the Anna Magnani thing going on, the baby Anna Magnani thing. I had the little fucking
you had the Oliver Twist.
So guys didn't hit on me as much, but when they did, I'll tell you one very funny encounter I had at 4 a.m. on Bowery. big guys coming towards me, right? And I was fearless in
We
those
were.
days. And he comes up to me and he pulls out this screwdriver, like he's like going to threaten me with it. And I just started laughing my ass off. And he just like looked at me like, huh? Put the screwdriver back in his pocket and smiled, and off he went.
I'm going to tell a story too like that. Somebody tries to hold me up. I had $10 in my bra. I wouldn't have it in my purse. They push in after me. I go, why don't you go rob someone uptown? Threw my purse in their face. They go, oh my God, you're right. This was my most horrifying, and horrifying because I turned the table on him. I'm walking back from CBGB's down to like 3rd and FUC. Some guy, 2:00 in the morning. Hey, you want to fuck my dog? I'm like, you fuck your fucking dog. End of story. Like, you fuck your fucking dog.
I need to unsee that.
Hey, I would have paid to see it. I'm like, who's on top, who's on bottom? I don't know. Anyway, we need to talk about what's going down now, because I feel first of all, look, it's kind of tricky for me because for 40 fucking years of my 40-something career, I've been considered a man hater, right? Sexist against men, because I first started taking down my father, that motherfucker, father of our country, presidents, and God the fucking Father. For years, diatribes, essays, spoken word, taking this down. Now, I get a little testy, and I think women should relate their stories as we have and as they should. But my problem right now with what's happening is you cannot compare a stubbed toe to having your foot amputated.
Thank you. I'm totally agreeing with you. It's kind of like this Cuomo thing. It's like, come on.
Well, what bothers you about it? What bothers? Because I'll trust me, I'm bothered. What bothers you?
What bothers me is that the guy was flirting. Okay, so maybe the worst that he did was put his hand on a woman's back. If I had a fucking dollar for every time a man has flirted with me like that, I would be able to feed the fucking poor. And how do you
deal with something?
Right?
If you don't want this flirtation, what does Liddell do?
Well, I used to just, cold cock a guy, I mean,
I used to just crack a dick when I could. No, but, go ahead.
What I'm saying is, if he's asking you if he can kiss you, you say, no, motherfucker.
I already put my list of Confucius one-liners about women, what they could and should say. But the thing is this.
You don't wait 2 years until Trump, or 20 or whatever it is, because Trump wants to get rid of him. And then all of a sudden, he flirted.
And the thing is, look, we know, as both being Sicilian, we do understand
Italian.
And we also understand there's pictures for decades of him kissing men, kissing women. Now, look, I'm not saying I don't want anybody to hold their dick over anybody's paycheck. But the thing is, and again, why wouldn't you want to go to the fucking New York Post and go, you know what? He said something I didn't like, so I just tweaked his left nut and he fell to the floor crying. Instead of, I was terrified because he asked me if I like older men. All you have to say is, I didn't even like my motherfucking dad, Grandpa. Back the fuck up. I don't get it. Tim, come in, please, because I'm about to have a fucking hernia.
Well, the thing is, I mean, growing up and having to read The Scarlet Letter, this new wave of Puritanism, it's so shocking to me because what is this? Is this going to be looked at as a progressive movement, or is it going to look at like modern McCarthyism?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is kind of a modern McCarthyism. And I think what happens is when these little flirtation things turn into like attacks and accusatory attacks about, rape, what it does is it distills real rapes.
Well, and Adele, we can speak about this because we both came from traumatic childhoods with unfortunately horrible things done to us by the male of the species, but which also taught us, first of all, we don't hate every man. I hate the theory and the concept of men, but I don't hate the individual man. And also, I'm blaming the world is not the way you want it to be. The world is the way it is. And there is sometimes a way to approach a person like hot dad Cuomo. He's so stuck in his old-fashioned Italian ways. What if you just said to him, I really, loudly, so other people hear it, I really don't like this. I don't like it. Could you just please not do that to me? Why do you have to go? Why do you think if you go to the paper, who's going to step up and protect you? Why can't you just figure out a way to deal with verbal? I know what an assault is verbally. I'm a master of it. So first of all, nobody's going to assault me verbally because they're going to be heckled to hell. But nobody should lay their hands on you. But again, do you now understand, women, how sensitive the male genitalia is? 2 fucking fists, 2 feet, legs, 120 to 200 pounds. They got 6 to 8 inches between their legs. It's very sensitive. And not only that, sometimes you just might have to confront it when it happens. I don't understand how women once were warriors become so intimidated by shit. And look, it is not right. Sexism exists. Racism exists. Nobody should have a dick held over their fucking paycheck, but you got to learn to stand up for yourself. And you know what? A screech alarm also helps. So does a throat punch. Or as you say, occasionally you just cold cock the motherfucker. I don't know. And you know what? If anybody has a problem with the way that I think that things could be balanced out, that is your problem, not mine. This is through trial and error. But going back again, sometimes humor can diffuse the situation. Like, as I said a few weeks ago, you put your hand on my lower back. I might say, hey, can't you move that down a few inches so I can shit in your fucking palm, motherfucker? Come on. And look, it's not as if you and I haven't had debates about this in the past. And I have to say, though, when all of this Me Too stuff started, yes, shit needed to be said. I'm not saying shit should not be said, and especially all the Hollywood bullshit, because that is atrocious that it was allowed and it still goes on. But again, you have to look at it too from the side. You got to stand up at some point. And you got to just stop it in its tracks, because actually, if one woman could make a difference with one man, it might be more effective than having many women painted as these withering little waifs. And like, he asked me if I like older men, and you're crying about it? You just say, no, you smell bad, motherfucker. Get the fuck away from me.
You have to look at all of these specific instances for what they are. And I think this, I don't know anything about, how Cuomo deals in his.
We know he's a bit of a raunchy grandpa, but you know what? What are you going to fucking do? He's not Trump. Right. 26 women coming after for rape, bragging he grabs him by the pussy. He is the only accused I've ever heard publicly apologize. I mean, they don't apologize. Victimizers do not apologize. Okay, you can say it was fraudulent. I'm just saying you have to put things into fucking perspective. Otherwise, everything is canceled.
Well, they're Al Frankening him is what they're doing.
They are.
Yeah.
To me, this is more about class divide than anything else. What I've been seeing, especially with the younger generation, is if you can afford to go to a fancy university, and of course, if the constant thread of history is the American story of the disenfranchised, having to fight for their freedom, their rights. But if you're coming from an upper middle class or rich background, eventually going back to identity politics, you feel left out, and so people are starting to synthesize these problems to feel included, even though they have never. Basically, they're appropriating suffering. It's like, you weren't decapitated for being a woman.
Right.
You were not lynched for being black. Right. You'll never be.
Right.
And you feel left out. And so you're actually going to synthesize this and basically you own this.
Right.
You own this. How obnoxious is that?
They want to own trauma. It's like.
And look, and let's just get this straight. A lot of men are fucking assholes. So are a lot of women. Okay. I am not insulting women who have been historically and forever at the same as whether sexism, racism, classism. It's always the other on the other side of white men in positions of power. What I'm saying is, buck up. I'm just disappointed that there's not headlines in the New York Post that say, he put his hand on my lower back and I punched him in the fucking nose, gave him a bloody nose, and then he called his mother. Now, I'm not saying violence is necessarily the solution, but a little threat goes a long way. And don't be threatened by a little threat.
But it's also this specter of the angry woman. You're not allowed.
Well, you know what? It's a little late for that, isn't it, honey? We've been angry our whole fucking lives.
Working class women have been shat on for centuries, but we're not allowed to be angry. And trust me, in academia, academic women from upper class white backgrounds, they don't take too kindly to working class.
Well, and this is why Camille Paglia, look, I don't agree with everything Camille Paglia says, but she says, look, our type of women who have had to defend themselves and know how to, it's a different breed. So
You did.
Well, specifically what she said is that blue collar women can handle sexual aggression better than privileged women.
Yes.
And privileged women are furious about it. In fact, they're so condescending. They're like, how are we going to teach these blue collar women how to handle these things? And they're like, and blue collar women is like, okay, if you're looking good and you get catcalled walking down the street, the responses are two things: either like, damn right I look good, or fuck you, I'm going to kill you. And where if you go to a privileged place where they're not prepared for anything because they've actually ironically lived in the walls of protection of like rich white guys, the things they think they hate but they don't. And so when someone talks to them, they're like, oh my god,
it's a very complex subject. And the thing is, the abuse of women, domestic violence, rape, murder on all levels needs to stop. But we are not going to end it by complaining that some old grandpa kissed me on the lips. You could have bit his fucking tongue. He didn't even stick it in your mouth. I'm just saying, there are, again, it's like you stubbed your toe, you didn't get your fucking foot amputated. It has got to be in perspective, because it reduces everything else to not being as important, because we're talking about the wrong fucking things. Now let's get back to the real issue here. Your music and your writing. Let's get back to that voice.
At the Mud Club in New York City, one of the doormen used to let these Wall Street young fucking, bozos. They used to let Wall Street guys in if they paid them off enough, right? So these young, flushed with dough guys would come in, and I had hair about that, like an inch long all over my head. And this one guy came up to me once and he's like, oh, they used to shave the heads of French prostitutes who collaborated with Nazis. That's fucking hot. And what did I do? I jumped up and cold cocked.
Oh my God.
And I don't think he probably tried that on any other woman in the bar. But yeah, you're so right, Tim, about working class women and the shit that we've had to go through and this namby-pambyism. And when it comes to appropriation, to me, all these accusations of appropriation that go on in the left, it's kind of like feeding right into the right wing, kind of like it's segregation reframed.
They're the fake left. They think they're left, but they're not. And just like talking about McCarthyism, same with fascism. People think it can only come in the form of, say, Nazi Germany or Mussolini. They don't realize it can even come from your own beliefs. It can
Cultural
come in
fascism.
any direction, which is intolerance.
Right, exactly. It's this appropriation and cancel culture. It's so fucked up because really all it does is it divides people. It's so fucking divisive.
Look, fear of a female planet. That's what I'm waiting for the come around.
And a lot of it comes from academia. It comes from
It does.
upper middle class, rich kids who talk this lexicon between themselves and then want to force it on us, which it's not helping.
Well, that is colonialism. Some privileged white person's like, I hate privileged white people. And they're telling me, and they're like, wait, isn't that what you are? And then they're like, you can't say that. It's like, well, isn't that what the rich have been doing forever? Like going into poor parts of the world and saying, you can't do this. You can't do this. They don't even realize they're behaving in the way of the form.
Okay. All right. Let's get back to the art of existence. All right. Let's get back to the art of existence.
I was 2 when you guys met. And I was 9 or 10 when the Thomas Dolby hit Hyperactive was on constant rotation on the radio. Little did I know I'd be talking to one of the vocalists, one of the main female vocalists on that track, if not the only one. I don't know if there's other background singers or not, which is a classic, of course. So what was this period like? I mean, how did you ever meet Thomas Dolby? How did this all happen?
When I was signed to Geffen, I was one of the first acts signed to Geffen Records, believe it or not. And that was kind of a shit show, which I'll go into in my next memoir. But Tom Dolby produced my first single for Geffen, which was called Build Me a Bridge. And I co-wrote that with Raymond Jones from Chic and Leslie Woods from the Au Pair.
You're not rich enough to support me, Mama. I don't get it.
Are you kidding? I didn't get a anyway. So so what happened was he loved my voice so much that he brought me over to England to sing on the Flat Earth with him. And we had a ball, but and then that was the end of me. And he used a ventriloquist dummy as me.
Well, that was in the video, right? Was that in the video?
Yeah.
So the question, have you Have you made up since? Have you run into?
No, we've made up since, and I've talked to him since, and I like Tom. He's a good guy, but
I mean, real talent, but that's so weird.
it is weird. I mean, men are weird, Jen.
So are the best women. We're weird. So did the Thomas Dolby lead to like the Tears for Fears? Just go through a bit of the trajectory of, because you've done so many diverse musical things and people pulled you in. So give us a little bit of a rundown after that.
Well, after the Geffen debacle, and that was crazy. I ended up getting into a fist fight with my producer on Geffen, and
who was the producer?
His name was Tony Mansfield.
Was he provided by Geffen Records, or did you pick
was.
Tony?
Well, that's kind of a story in itself, because I was writing tracks with Brenda Alderman, the black bass player from the Bloods. Very funky. We worked so well together, and they signed me on the strength of those tracks. As soon as they signed me, it's like, you can't write with Brenda anymore. We want you to do this. You can't have Jane Friedman manage you. We want you to be managed by this.
Why?
So they stripped me of all of my support network, threw me into, I worked with Tom, but after I worked with Tom, they took his tapes and remixed them without his permission. So he wouldn't do my album because he hated my
right, didn't like that.
So it was just one thing after
typical,
another.
typical, especially mainstream record label bullshit that goes back forever. It's just no concern, rip you off, hostage you.
Yeah.
Who's calling the shots on this?
The A&R man at Geffen Records, who I will name in the book.
All right, carry on.
But so I end up in this like little house in the south of England, in this hamlet with Tony Mansfield in a fucking Fairlight.
I love the Fairlight, but go ahead.
And they're like shoving money down his pipe hole to produce this album with me, and nothing was getting done. And he was just drinking up all the profits and having all these house parties. And one night we were both really drunk at this party, and there was this crazy guy making insults about American Black people. And I got into an argument with him, and Mansfield threw me up against a wall. And that was it. I fucking went ape shit.
Trust me, she may be small, but she stuff is fucking nails.
And then, so the next day I was dropped from Geffen, right?
You should have called Don King and entered the boxing ring, honey.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I've got this terrible reputation in the music business, and I have, I need to seize my narrative, which is going to happen in the next memoir.
That's good.
Because these guys, and some women too, have skewed my narrative in a way that, has left me with this bad.
You know what? You still have a legacy. So let's go on from there. Fuck Geffen. They another asshole that sucks. So, but opportunities still came.
Yeah, well, I lived in England for a while. I sang with Culture Club. I sang with Thomas.
Tears for Fears, you did the tour?
That came much later after Chrysalis. I signed to Chrysalis. Okay. Did the record with Scritti Politti, When It's Over, which should have been a top pop hit, right? And there was a screw up with the legalities of Fred Marr and David Gamson working in England at the time to produce the record. So they couldn't release the record. They couldn't release it as a single. It's just, it was like one thing after another. But of course, I get blamed for everything.
If only we were really blamed for the shit we did in the right way. Come on.
Hey, listen, I was no angel, but,
You were a little fucking devil, but I did love you. Still do. Because we're not.
But anyway, that's right. But I came back to America, did an album with Chrysalis, got molested by the attempted molest by the album promotion guy. It's just one thing after another. But also I did a song on that album called Can't Stop the Dance. And I was listening to your podcast with Tanya Pearson and that talk about like witches flying on like hallucinogenic smeared dildos. And listen to Can't Stop the Dance, because it's my rendering of Pirate Jenny. And it scared the bejesus out of these guys. It is like this feminist Uber like manifesto that just makes the hairs on the back of your head.
Adele, I think we need to write a manifesto. I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah. So anyway, to make a long story short, I just had like such a hard time in the music business. It was really rough.
It's weird because I mean, you also mentioned maybe some prejudice about being a homosexual. Would you say so? I mean,
Yeah, they wanted me to stay in the closet.
Well, the thing is, I mean, the thing is, hang on. I mean, there's no closet big enough for Adele. She doesn't belong in just one closet. She goes from here to there in the other place. Kind of like me that way. It's like there's no term for it.
Yeah, but in those days, Tim, like Ellen DeGeneres wasn't even out of the closet.
Right. And David Geffen didn't come out until later,
right?
Much
later. And Judy Sill, do you guys know who Judy Sill is? Oh my God.
No.
She was signed to one of Geffen's labels, like I think Asylum, like back in the day when all the, the great singer-songwriters were in Laurel Canyon. He was amazing. And he was not giving her any play because she wasn't pretty, in a conventional way that pop stars should be. And she got really screwed by Geffen, and she outed him on a radio show.
Okay.
And he dropped her.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So, yeah. So, I mean, there's all these politics. You need to read this great book by Dorothy Carvalho called Anything for a Hit. And it's about her working for Ahmet Ertegun, and she dishes the hot tea.
Well, I read Hitmen. I've read Hitmen, which is
this is even better.
Oh, I'm curious. Yeah.
Like Ahmet Ertegun, you wouldn't believe it.
Well, the thing that's strange about you, Adele, one of the many things I love is that you're both avant. And also, you could be extremely, when I say mainstream, I mean in the traditional good sense of gospel singers, of Black protest music. You have the chops vocally, and you can write songs that could elevate to that point. But again, in the mainstream music industry, it's fucking tokenism. They'll take one of this, one of that, one of the other, and you don't fit in there. What are they going to do with you? Ain't going to do nothing.
Also, it's a time when, like social media, the internet, all of it, everything is so narcissistic and competitive. And it's always this bid for relevance. You're always having to be online competing with everybody else. I can't do it. It just exhausts
me. Don't do any of it. But so let's talk about, you were writing songs, but I think you probably, you probably always writing in your notebooks, writing journals, started to write, even got you onto the stage with me, doing a few spoken word back in the day, right? And the difference between writing and doing music is what?
Well, writing, you're completely solitary. You're just alone on your desk and you're working. With music, you have to have people that will promote you, book you at gigs, and help you pay for recordings. And, it's just a whole infrastructure that you have to be very ambitious to get into. I don't have that much ambition right now.
Well, also,
that. Although I have a treasure chest of songs, but I just, I don't have.
See, I was very lucky in the sense that because I never had a thought of my shit going anywhere other than maybe 500 to 1,000 copies, but I always got it documented. I always got it recorded. I manipulated small labels into licensing, relicensing, and then ended up owning my own shit. But it's a very different thing because it's always going to be subterranean. And I never had a thought that it would go any further, but I still own it. And that's the smartest thing I ever frickin' did.
But you've always charted your own course, and you're an iconoclast. You control everything you do. You do a brilliant job at, you're a punch in the face of the patriarchy, and you always have
been. And I love to work with other people, and I always do. And I love the recordings we did on my album, Smoke in the Shadows, because it's totally took me to a different level, a different side. And people can check it out. It's out there. Everything's online anyway. So, but now the writing, the thing is too with the writing, it's onanistic. People have no idea. What I've discussed this with you before. Sometimes if you got to write something, this is the Italian in us. Oh, I might have to clean that closet before I can sit down and do something, because we both have a very organized environment. Everything's got to be immaculate. Mm-hmm. Some people creating chaos. We don't do that. It's like, I better move that spare sheet of paper that's on the desk over there. I can't sit down. What is this thing? Right?
No,
right?
I fold my towels in threes. I mean, it's insane. I have to have everything completely sparse and zen-like before I can sit down to work. That's just, I've
You
always
see the
been
way
that
I live, it's the same way. It's like, I don't want to see a spare piece of motherfucking paper. What the hell? And maybe it's because we came out of such chaos.
I think so. It has something to do with our background, our childhoods and the chaos. And
Hey,
all
my
that,
sister sleeps on a path on her bed. I'm not going any further with that.
Oh, no.
Just saying.
Okay. Well, you should have seen my poor mother's place before she.
I'm sure.
Oh,
trust me, the vision. I don't need to see it. I know what I know what I saw. What else? We got to tie this up, Adele. There's just so much more to even talk about.
Yeah, there's so much. I feel like we barely scratched the surface.
And that's why people can go to your website. You have coming up, I do recommend Why Labelle Matters, coming out on the University of Texas Press, March 23rd.
It sounds like a really cool book.
I mean, the writing is so good. And also, as I said before, not only memoir, but also his history of political and just damn fine writing. And I really think it's the top of your game, honey.
Thank you so much. I mean, I still have some music. I might be coming back out in the summer.
I'm sure it will, because why wouldn't it? Look, it's in your blood. It's got to come out. It's not just, was it called The Bloods for nothing? It's got to come out. This has been the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Adele Bertei, my friend of now since Tim was 2. What can I say? It's what we do. I'll meet you at the best jukebox we can find as soon as we can fly. Somewhere meeting in the middle, baby.
We'll be dancing soon.
Love you too. Thank you, Del.